Thank you for joining us today for the virtual office hours and a short presentation on collection management policies. This monthly series is a program of the Vermont Historical Records Program, part of the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration. VHRP is generously funded by the National Historical Publications and Records Commission and the Vermont Secretary of State's Office. My name is Jane Cadwallader, and as the roving archivist, I provide technical assistance and guidance to historical societies, public libraries with special collections, and municipalities in support of the VHRP mission to improve public access to and engagement with historical records, and to encourage and facilitate collaborative efforts among Vermont's historical records repositories. Before we get started, I have a short overview. Today's presentation will be asking what is a collections management policy and what is its purpose for a cultural heritage organization. We're going to look at some key components and where to start. And lastly, we'll look at some of the resources, including the developing a collections management policy from the American Alliance of Museums. So to start with, what is a policy? A policy is a high-level document that identifies how an institution manages its activities. These documents are usually approved by the organization's highest authority, which could be a board of trustees, etc. And they mandate, specify, or prohibit certain behaviors by that organization. Policies have a widespread application and are not meant to be for specific procedures or actions. They are non-negotiable and they do not change frequently. These documents are usually reviewed and updated every few years. And they tell us what should be done and sometimes why. A policy differs from procedure in the ways that it is a widespread application, high-level document, and it does not outline steps to implement that policy. Therefore, a collection management policy is a set of policies that address various aspects of collections management. This policy defines the scope of a museum's collection and how the museum cares for and makes collections available to the public. A collections management policy also explains the roles of parties responsible for managing the museum's collections. And this definition is from the American Alliance of Museums, from the collections management policy, developing a collections management policy document pictured on the first slide of this presentation. So a collections management policy is not a one-size-fits-all document. This needs to be specifically tailored to the activities, functions, and collections of your own organization. For example, does your organization loan materials? Do you use some of your objects to teach? Then you would have specific policies outlining these activities. A collections management policy is a multi-step process. It takes time and it takes resources. So why are we doing all of this work? Because we want to document how our institute manages its collections based on its mission and vision statements. This document instructs us how we will do these activities, but it also outlines this information for the governing bodies of the institution, the public, and future staff and/or volunteers. With this document, they can see the priorities we have laid out and understand the steps we have taken in past decisions. So collection management policies, as we discussed before, are unique to their respective institutions. However, there are some key components that should be considered when you are making your own. The first is adding your mission and vision statements for your organization. These statements inform the work that your organization does. For example, if your mission states that you are a research repository, you should have a policy on access and use. If your mission states you collect town history, then this would be reflected in your collecting policy. The statement of authority defines the roles for the governing authority, committees, and staff and/or volunteer positions in your organization. It is not a by name list, but a description of roles within your institution and how they interact with the collections. The collecting scope details what you collect, the time period, the location, and other criteria. This is an important statement that helps to describe your current collection and also how it is shaped in the future. Acquisitions need to be in line with this mission and based on the collecting policy. You should be considering if the material enhances the organization's mission, can be cared for, stored safely, and used. For example, if you can use it in an exhibit or in a research capacity. The deaccession policy can help a museum in its transparency for the governing authority, the public, and the staff and/or volunteers. And that is by showing how and when the organization removes items from its collections and how they disposition the items, whether it is by auction, transfer to another organization, or perhaps to an education collection. Not every organization has incoming or outgoing loans. This would be something to consider if that is an activity that your organization already does or is looking into. But outlining how those activities happen is important in this policy. You also want to identify how you're documenting collections. In the collecting scope, you would have identified your permanent collection, if you had an education collection and or a research collection. The documenting collections would show how you would keep information about those collections. Collection care will outline how you would apply conservation or preservation methods to various parts of the collections, when you would use an outside conservator, or when you would focus on preservation activities like rehousing collections or using preventative measures. Access and use is for research collections and how people would be able to interact with the collections that you hold. And intellectual property will outline how these things can be used for publications, etc. So I just gave you a lot of information on the different parts of a collections management policy that could be used. So where do you start with all of this information? The first is, this is not a solo project. This is something where you want to create a team to work with, to share ideas, to delegate different parts of the project, and to work on comments and feedback. So this team depends, of course, on the size of your organization, but it can be with staff or volunteers, board members, If your organization has a collections committee, it's highly recommended that members of the collections committee are on there as well. And of course, this process takes time, so this will not be an overnight project. Plan to take some time for this. You want to review different collections management policy resources and determine the needs of your organization. There are a lot of different toolkits, templates, articles, books about collections management policies. So it's important to review these with your team so you have an idea of what's expected of the team and start figuring out the needs of your organization. Like I mentioned before, if you do not plan on loaning out materials or taking incoming loans, you would not have a policy for that in there. But it also might be important to mention that you aren't planning on doing that and give the reasons why. You may have a research room. If that's something that you have, it's recommended that you spend time focusing on the access and use policies. So people are aware of the expectations when they're using materials from the collection and how they're allowed to use those. And of course, getting feedback. You know, there are hundreds of organizations within Vermont, thousands within the United States, and they too are working on these types of policies or already have them in place. So reach out to your professional organizations or to your local organizations. Maybe reach out to the town next door and see if they've been working on a collection management policy and ask for their feedback or if they have any resources that they have used. And based on that last statement, here are a list of a few resources that I have put together that may be of use to you. The Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts has created a collections management policy toolkit. This is a free resource that you can use to develop a collections management policy in a template that they have created, and they ask pointed questions about different aspects of your collection to help fill that out. This is a very cool tool, and it's recommended that if you don't use it, at least to look at it and the resources that they have provided. The Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts also has a list of plans, policies, and procedures that can be of use as well. Now, my program, Vermont Historical Records Program, also maintains a resource library on our website with a section titled Collections Management, Care, and Storage. This set has some great links to resources and also a general overview of collections management, which can be a helpful starting point. As mentioned on the front page, we do have a link for the American Alliance of Museums developing a collections management policy. And this is a fairly short document that goes through the different parts of a collections management policy and helps with defining these, what's needed for them, and also provides additional resources at the end. I also put an example of a collections management policy link from the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. This is a fairly large organization, but I did point it out because it is a fairly short document, but again, it goes through those items. Remember that this is a document tailored for the specific organization, but it is possible to look at what they have and possibly use parts of that for your own organization if they make sense. And lastly, from the League of Local Historical Societies and Museums at the Vermont Historical Society, they just created a local historical societies handbook that has some really great glossaries, checklists, and identifies key aspects of historical society, including collection management policy. So I recommend taking a look at that as well. Thank you for listening to this short presentation on collections management policy. I hope it gives you some ideas of where to start or some resources that may be helpful to your organization. If you have any questions, comments, or further information, please feel free to contact me at sos.vhrp@vermont.gov. If you are interested in developing a collections management policy, please also feel free to reach out to us. And we do have some upcoming programming that we're hoping to put together to help with this process. Thank you, and have a good day.